Hello there, Pumpkinists. It's Robert once again, and I'm here today to tell you why self-control matters. No, I'm here to tell you why we don't eat pumpkins for half the year. So at first it may seem strange that we choose to go without the finest of vegetables for half the year. After all, if you've seen my video from this October, you know how I feel about the pumpkin. So in this video we're going to ask, why are the pumpkin fasts? Now, in the happier times of the year, we eat the pumpkins to honor our great Lord, especially around the time of the Hallowing in symbolic equivalence with his sacrifice, and we continue eating pumpkins after the Hallowing as the nights grow long and cold, and we require the sweet flesh of the gourd to give us sustenance and energy so that we may survive as we are nearly alone through the winter. However, as the winter comes to a close, or at least the worst of it has passed, we no longer require the pumpkin, and so we must let it go. And this is the first of the reasons that we undertake the pumpkin fasts. By many different cultures, peoples, and scientific cycles, the year has always been split into halves of a sort. In the north and south of the planet, you have summer and winter. In the middle, you have the wet and dry seasons. You have the time in which the days are getting longer and the time in which they're getting shorter, daylight savings time, and many others. All of these have something to do with the way that the Earth's rotation around the sun causes the weather, and therefore nearly everything, to change on a cyclical yearly basis. And the pumpkin fasts are no different. Broadly speaking, the year split the halves into the pumpkinist seasons, or the dark and the light halves. These halves take into account the Earth seasons, specifically in north-central North America, where the church is based. These also take into account the cycles of our gods and the cultural associations that come with the various parts of the year, starting with the dark half of the year beginning on August 3rd and going through the month of January. This half of the year contains the winter solstice, as long as all of the darkest days of the year, so in this way it is literally dark. In the northern regions of the globe, this is also the coldest time of the year, when the starch one gains from consuming the pumpkin is useful in staying alive and warm. This is also the time of the year when all of the negative events in our pantheon occur, such as the death of Vinia, the hollowing of the great pumpkin, and the departure of Spider. So we eat the pumpkin then to prepare for it. There are a few good occurrences in our calendar during this time of the year, but even these are tinged with sadness. The Hallowing is our biggest holiday and a party in honor of the Great Pumpkin, but it's also the time when he is forced to hollow himself out, and both he and Vinia pass away. The other holiday during this time, Festivus Day, is a time for gathering and feasting and having bonfires with friends and family, but it's also a holiday of necessity. We light fires and gather together to keep ourselves warm as the earth does its best to freeze around us. And we come together on this day to honor Festiva, not in celebration of her return to life as with Vinia, or in honor of the harvest and fun as with Spider, but a strengthening ritual to keep her alive so that she can protect us. For these reasons, this part of the year is the darkest and the saddest, so to keep ourselves happy and bring balance to the year, we consume the pumpkin during this time. It brings us not just joy and sustenance, but connects us to our great Lord, even after he perishes. In the lighter times of the year, after the solstice and the worst of the winter are over, and Festiva and Spider are able to work together to claw the world out of the dark and cold, as Vinia and the Great Pumpkin rise once more and the world is warm, we no longer require the pumpkin, and we must give it up. Having to do this brings a semblance of balance to the year, as the great power of the pumpkins lightens the dark half of the year, and its absence brings darkness to the lighter half. This balance is what allows us to survive and thrive equally throughout the entire year, as we have favor and struggle throughout the year to simultaneously grant us advantage and force us to grow strong throughout the whole year. So, if you're a Gaelic history professor or otherwise incredibly well educated in ancient Gaelic traditions for some reason, you may have noticed a correlation between the start and end of the pumpkin fasts and the Gaelic holidays of Imbolc and Lunasa. While it is unknown whether these holidays were originally inspired by pumpkinism or the other way round, the similarities are undeniable. Normally I would simply assume, as I do with Christianity and most of the other religions, that pumpkinism came first, but recent evidence has shown that the history and language of Gaelic culture are so ancient that it may even predate pumpkinism as an organized faith, and may have had an influence on when exactly the pumpkinist seasons began and ended. Anyways, the specifics of these two holidays are quite interesting as well. First of all, Imbolc occurs on the 1st of February, and Lunasa occurs on either the 1st of August or the closest Sunday to that day, a set of dates that correspond very closely with the January 31st to August 3rd schedule of the pumpkin fasts, with a slight extension to account for the days of feasting that occur on either end of the pumpkin fasts. The other similarity comes in how these holidays are celebrated. Imbolc, the one in February, is a feast day, similar to the start of the fasts. It is also a celebration of the arrival of spring and the year beginning to get warmer, just as we celebrate the return of the lighter half of the year. Lunasa, the holiday celebrated in August, is a celebration of the harvest. During this time, we celebrate the harvest as well, although less broadly as we mainly care about the return of one plant. We celebrate the return of the pumpkin and we begin to be able to consume them again in time for the winter, just as the Gaelic holiday celebrates the return of the harvest and full stores for the winter. The third and smallest reason that we celebrate the pumpkin fasts are because of the cycles of nature. After all, the pumpkin is a winter squash, meaning that it's harvested in late summer and fall at the ripest that it can possibly get. The Church of the Great Pumpkin supports sustainable agriculture, and to consume pumpkins in midsummer or spring would require them to be planted and harvested very far out of season, which is both very difficult for farmers to do and can actually hurt the farmland. For this reason as well, we respect the whims of Vinia, accomplice of nature, when we eat the pumpkin in season, and refrain from it out of season as she prepares the farmland to be ready for the next year of gourd harvests. Well, Pumpkinists, I hope that you have learned a little something about your faith from this video, and that you refrain from eating pumpkins during this lighter half of the year so that the balance can be retained and the farmlands healed. I hope that your pies are sweet, your home is warm, and your trees are tall. Goodbye. Respect the whims of the vines. The vines?